We have a somewhat short topic today dealing with resources available for crop production. Mainly what this topic is going to deal with will be the land resources available for crop production. Obviously there are a lot of resources such as water and nutrients that affect crop productivity, but the most, well, with the exception of water, the most finite thing that we have is land area available and its suitability for crop production. And this is what this section is going to deal with. It is somewhat, we will get my pointer correctly here. Again, it'll be somewhat short, and I'll be throwing a lot of numbers at you, but it'll put a lot of things in perspective that will tell you a little bit about what problems we face. Looking at world land area. Now we're talking about the entire earth here now, not just the United States, which I will cover in just a minute. About 29% of the Earth's surface is land area. Most of the rest of it, we are a water planet. We are a planet that is covered with 71% of our surface is covered by water, which for the most part makes it unsuitable for any kind of agriculture. We do get some nourishment from the sea. We get some limited amount of protein by fishing, not as much as we need, however. And I have had students propose that we can grow crops on the surface of the sea, which is kind of a unique concept. But at any rate, we don't have as much land area, nearly as much as we do water area. And we do have 37 billion acres of land area on the surface of the earth. Of this 370 billion acres, it is partitioned such that about 20% of it is mountainous, 9% of it is desert, 46% is tropical rainforest and this would include a lot of other submarginal areas, swampy areas, riparian areas, other areas that are just not suitable for crop production for one reason or another. So this leaves us about 25% of the total of 37 billion that is suitable for some sort of crop production. And this covers a lot of territory. Only about half of this, however, is suitable for economic crop production. And this, by the time you parse this all out and divide it all out, it amounts to about 3.6 billion acres under cultivation in the world. Turning our attention to U.S. land distribution and use. We have a total land area in the United States of about 2.7 or 2.3 billion acres. 375 million acres of this is in Alaska, and we don't grow many crops in Alaska. There's a couple of things that will grow up there. Certainly people that are homesteading up there have gardens and things like that, but for economic crop production it's just not feasible. This leaves about a 1.9 billion acres in the lower 48 states. About 66 million acres, about 3% of the U.S. land area is devoted to urban use. We hear a lot about the encroachment of urban areas into our rural areas and taking a lot of good cropland, and indeed they do tend to take some of the best land because it's easier to build on for building urban areas. But this is really not a major issue at the present time. Urban use, of course, are devoted to cities, transportation, public installations, and about 75% of our population lives in these areas. Rural residential, that is people that live out in the country that do not live in urban areas but have homesteads, houses, these types of things, will take up about 73 million acres. Subdivisions, farmhouses, etc. Together, the developed and rural residential land make up about 6.1% of our available land area, so it still leaves the vast majority that is not developed in some way. About 747 million acres of this are in forest. We graze in this country about 788 million acres. This is land area that is not used for row crop production at least, but it is used for agriculture in that we graze animals on it. We produce forage and we graze animals. It's usually not suited for anything else, and this is why we do this. It's an area about 8.3 states the size of Montana, so this represents a substantial part of the lower 48 states. Only about 349 million acres are actually planted in crops. And of this 349 million acres, about 4 crops occupy 80% of it. These crops are crops that we feed to livestock: corn, soybean, alfalfa, hay, and wheat. These 4 crops occupy 80% of our row crop area in the United States. A few more points about land use, about 2 of our crops, corn and soybean. And if you ever travel in the Midwestern part of the United States and across the states of Indiana, Ohio, Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, some of the big corn belt states, they occupy more of the land area in the U.S. than all of the urbanization. You'll see mostly corn and soybean in these areas, not like we have in the Southeast. Rural residential, highways, railroads, commercial centers, malls, industrial parks, golf courses combined, 2 crops take up more land area than all of these other uses combined. If you look at Interstate 75 through Georgia, for example, it runs north and south. It runs from Chattanooga, Tennessee, through Valdosta on into Florida, through Atlanta, through Tifton, through Macon, through other areas. It occupies about 20,000 acres just for the right-of-way. If you measured the right-of-way from one side of the road to the other and didn't count all the other exits and everything else, just for that right-of-way, takes up about 20,000 acres in the state of Georgia. About 70% of all the cultivated cropland in the world is occupied by cereal grain crops. Cereal grains are going to be your wheat, your rice, your barley, your corn, these grass crops that provide the grains that we either eat or feed to livestock. 70% of all cultivated land is occupied by these types of crops. The amount of land that we use to produce all the vegetables in the U.S. is less than 3 million acres. And remember that we have about 349 million acres are planted to crops. So if we're only planting 3 million acres, that's about 1% of our land area that is actually used to produce all the vegetables consumed in the produced and consumed in the U.S. A lot of this land is out in the Central Valley of California. That's our vegetable breadbasket. That's where a lot of our vegetables come from, and we can produce a lot of vegetables intensively on this kind of land because of its the intensive nature of production. We get a lot of production, for example, from an acre of tomatoes in terms of the amount of tomatoes produced, or potatoes, or anything else like that. So this is the end of this particular segment. It's been a very brief segment, but it gives you some idea about how we have and how we use the amount of land area that we do for crop production in the United States.